Praise be the most holy name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, now and forever and ever. Amen. June 29, 2025, a wonderful day for the Holy Church. Today, the Church celebrates the feast day of the princes of the Church, the very big apostles, Saints Peter and Paul. In this solemnity, remember what the Lord said to his apostles in the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verse 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide. In this solemnity, we wish everybody in the world a wonderful and happy feast day. And with me on the other side, from California this time, as a matter of fact, is a wonderful friend, a wonderful mother, wonderful professional and investigative journalist, and the podcaster herself as well, Lara Logan, a friend of the show and friend of Father Andre and the Mission of Hope and Mercy. I want to wish you a happy feast day, and I welcome you directly to the show.
Thank you so much, Father. And same to you.
You know, Lara, when I lived in Italy, one of my favorite places to go visit was the place where Jesus and St. Peter met. So in the year 66 or 67, probably a few months before St. Peter was killed by the Emperor Nero, you know, Peter was running away from Rome because, of course, Jesus gave him the keys of the kingdom and told him, you're the best and you're the big apostle. You have the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And then when the Emperor Nero in Rome started killing the Christians, basically, Peter decided that it is for his best interest to run away. As usual, Peter wasn't really always the best character in his courage. But as he was running away, he goes to a crossroad. We know in Rome it's called Via Ardeatina and Via Appia. And so one road is called in English, basically, the road of the bees, like the honeybees, basically. And Via Ardeatina is the road of the fire, And there, Peter looks and he sees a naked man carrying a wood piece, like a cross, and walking towards Rome in a hurry, and he's naked. And Peter stops and he looks at the naked man and he tells him, Domine, quo vadis? Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answers him, I am going to Rome to be crucified for my people because you're leaving. And of course, Peter immediately leaves his stick there on Via Ardeatina and Via Appia, goes back to the Circo Massimo inside the Vatican, which today there is a corner of the Basilica of St. Peter, the museums of the Vatican, and the Cappella Sistina, the Sistine Chapel. And there he faces face to face Nero. And he tells him, now this place, which was always the place where Satan governed the world, is going to be the rock, the foundation of the church. And funny enough that we know, in fact, that St. Peter was buried under the on the corner side of the Circo Massimo. And then later on, King Constantine builds this big basilica. And in fact, the basilica is built above the actual pillar under which the Peter is buried. Today is an engineering fact. If you try to remove the head of St. Peter from underneath that pillar, the cupola of St. Peter falls, literally. The Basilica of St. Peter falls. So this is to remind us that in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, from verse 12 to 22, Jesus tells Peter, you are the rock, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Lara Logan, good Sunday morning. I'm not going to speak a lot. I want to introduce you to our dear friend, Kirk Ham. He's a constitutional lawyer and a friend of the Mission of Hope and Mercy here in Colorado. And we know we want to talk to you to make the case for the world, to make the case for President Trump, to make the case also for the poor people in the Middle East and the people in the United States, to make the case for peace. What is going on between Iran and the United States and Israel from the perspective of what you think President Trump is trying to measure and put together, and what type of action he is considering to take?
Well, you know, Father Mahana, if you listen to President Trump over time, one area where he's been consistent is that he has always said he will never show his hand, right? He's a poker player. And so, you know, whatever he's saying publicly, he's leaving a lot out. You know, he's demonstrated that that is the case. And he also, when he was asked this question by a reporter, he said, why would I tell you what I'm planning on doing? So I always think it's important to listen to what people tell you with their own words, right? What do the Iranians say? what does the regime say versus what do many of the people say? What do the people, the opposition say versus what do those who are pro the regime say? And the same in the United States. What does President Trump say publicly? What is his administration doing? How do the words measure up against the actions? And it's the same thing. So with the Israelis, right? But
Right.
what we can clearly see here is that when October 7th came along and Hamas crossed the border into Israel, as you know very well with your knowledge and experience in the region coming from Lebanon, Hamas did that with the backing, both financial and physical, ideological backing of the state of Iran. You could argue credibly that without Iran, October 7th would never have happened. Hamas, not very long ago, was an organization that nobody took very seriously because on their own, their capability is extremely limited. And so the professionalization of Hamas, largely linked to their relationship with Hezbollah, which is another Iranian proxy. As you know, people in Lebanon are very familiar with Hezbollah. So really, when you look at that, in a sense, Israel has been at war with Iran from the very beginning, from October 7th. Now, of course, you can go back further, because from the beginning of Israel, from the day that it was founded, the mullahs in Iran, the moment they got into power, they lost no time in condemning the state of Israel, and they have never wavered in their statement: death to the great Satan, which is the United States of America, and death to Israel. So the regime in Iran, I don't know if people in the U.S. really factor into their analysis the fact that the regime in Iran has not changed for many, many, many decades. And so you have a consistent policy. Now, in the United States, you get a Democrat government, you get administration, you get a Republican administration. In theory, those come from opposing points of view, and some things are consistent, but a lot of our policies change over time. Well, this is not the case with Iran. They have been consistent from the very beginning that, as far as they're concerned, the state of Israel is illegitimate, has no right to exist, and their stated objective is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So, we know the United States' relationship with Israel. We know that the United States has been an ally and a friend to Israel for a long time. But what we leave out of that part of the conversation is that Israel is of huge strategic importance to the United States. So people act as if this is a one-way relationship, that, it's only because of the Israeli lobby in the United States, or because, there are Jewish people that run Hollywood, or, Jewish people that run the banking sector, or whatever, or people will argue that there's a disproportionate number of Jewish people that are involved in politics and banking and lobbying and so on. So because of all of these things, what we leave out of that conversation is the strategic importance of Israel to the United States of America. We know that Iran is backed by Russia, backed by China, backed by North Korea, and so on, Venezuela. But what does that really mean? It means that the adversaries of the United States are aligned together in their relationship with Iran. So, of course, when the United States is talking about Iran, they really are talking about everybody else. And when Iran is talking about the United States, they know exactly, they're speaking in many respects on behalf of this united force of adversaries of the U.S. Now, there are a lot of people in the United States that want peace through strength and strength through peace, and they don't want to see the U.S. You can hear it. There's a groundswell, of people, even within the conservative base or from the right, that is saying we don't want to go to war anymore. We don't want to go to war anymore. So what do they not address? Well, it's a nice idea that you can just have peace through strength, and you can only have strength through peace. That's a great idea, that we have the luxury of having those kind of conversations in the United States, because we've had peace in the United States for so long. And it doesn't account for the fact that the United States has adversaries who seek the demise of this country. So Iran is one of those adversaries. Unfortunately, in this moment, Iran has been aided in their antipathy towards the United States by politicians within the United States itself and leadership within the United States. Barack Obama gave Iran, it's no secret that former President Barack Obama gave Iran millions and millions and millions of dollars in theory to stop a nuclear program that we all knew it wasn't going to stop the nuclear program. All it did was help Iran finance terrorist organizations, its terrorist proxies all across the world. So whether, you could say, you could make an argument that the United States has been at war with Iran for a very long time. For example, the Houthis have been, bombing ships in the Straits of Hormuz. Well, who supplies the Houthis with weapons? Who supplies the Houthis with training? Who supplies the Houthis with ideological or state backing? I mean, this is Iran, right? The same can be said of Hamas. The same can be said of Hezbollah. The same can be said of Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and so on. So I'm trying to give you, I know I'm not giving you a succinct, here's the, you asked me a big question, right. and the big answer is that there is an important strategic relationship with Israel. And right now, the United States has really watched as Israel has reduced the capability of Hamas and Hezbollah without having to put a single American soldier on the ground or an American soldier in harm's way. So I know you want to ask me something.
I want to give you the whole time in the world, because you know how much I trust your opinion, and you come also from a background that you know a lot about the region. I'm just frustrated personally, and in the end and in the beginning, I am a priest. You are a mother. You are a real American. Mm-hmm. Connect also to the Middle East, to North Africa, to South Africa. I mean, you have yourself international care as well for the world. But you said there is a further hate that goes back, and the consistency of the hate that Iran always promoted since 1979. But I ask you that simple question: Khomeini was raised in France, right? Khomeini, the founder of the Muslim revolution. And this always and somehow puts us in a perplexed situation as Lebanese people. Before I came in America, you and Joe and many friends have helped me a lot. They hurted me, right? They hurt me when they thought I'm the priest who blessed the White House. And, I gave the statue of Our Lady of Fatima to the president. Immediately they hurt me. They used the church even, right? To try to destroy me. They think they succeeded. But look now what's happening to them. 1983 Beirut Barak bombings was a terrorist attack on U.S. Marines. Ronald Reagan had the upper hand in Lebanon to respond right then and there. Instead, he decides to withdraw from Lebanon, to withdraw from the Middle East immediately. We lost 241 American servicemen. We lost another 50 or so French as well, servicemen in the French military. About 350 people actually died after that bombing. Was that the right decision as a foreign policy at that time? Couldn't then that fight with Hezbollah have been accomplished right then and there? And Hezbollah did not even have 5,000 soldiers in Lebanon and was capable to blow up an entire barricade and walk through Beirut and bomb the U.S. embassy. Was this really something? I do not know. Is it really, these were natural things happening? Were they taken really off guard? Or Hezbollah grew up from, few weapons in their hands to 150,000 missiles and ballistic missiles planted everywhere in Lebanon, taking the Lebanese people and the Christians hostages and the local Muslim community hostages. And in 2006, as you know, I was stuck in Lebanon as well, and I was helping the refugees. Israel had the upper hand, and they almost terminated Hezbollah, but then they decided after 40 days, between July 4th all the way till August 22, they said, okay, now we stopped. We achieved our objective. After that, Iran and Hezbollah confiscated Lebanon. The Beirut bombing happened in 2020, and then you have more weapons, of mass. Basically, we do not know what's happened in Beirut. Explosion on, August 4th of 2020 revealed that there is a dirty bomb basically somewhere in Beirut, and nobody spoke.
Sure looked like it.
Yeah, spoke about it. Was this, and you said domestically, our foreign policy, it seems we have two policies with Iran. Some of us give them money, and we know they are consistent in their hate to Israel, to the Christians, and I'm sure they're not free from ISIS, they're not free from Al-Qaeda, they're not free even from the Sunni Usulis. I think Iran has a hand somewhere, with the Sunni Usulis movements. Why was all of this allowed? And President Trump is aware of that, and I know from the beginning, he knows that he wants to make a peace in the world. Does he have enough support internally in the United States? Are we united enough, or are we infiltrated?
Okay, so you asked 20 questions in
I
one
know.
question. But I know you, I can follow you. So I think the most important thing, I think in a way you answered your own question when you said it appears that there are two competing policies. That is absolutely right. Long before many of us, certainly long before I realized it, there have been two competing factions both within the United States and all over the world. And those factions, sometimes they overlap, sometimes they cross over political lines, but essentially what you're looking at is people with a globalist point of view and people who believe in nation states and continuing to rule according to the principles on which this country was founded. So if you try to evaluate American or Israeli policy within a one-dimensional lens, then it is hard really to, I think, to have clarity on a number of issues because it appears to be contradictory because it is contradictory. This is true. And what I would say to you is, yes, it's a fair question that, okay, when they had the opportunity to do this, why didn't they do it? Well, we can't go back in time and answer that definitively at that moment. But what we can do is we can look at the patterns that emerge over time. And what has emerged over time is that really, we see within the intelligence services of the United States and across the government, we see that there are many people who are pursuing an agenda that is counter to the sitting president of the United States today. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that there is a massive distrust in the government after COVID, after the vaccines, after, say, WMD in Iraq. These are the things that people talk about, right? They say, well, the government lied before, so they must be lying now. The government has lied to us so many times, I don't believe them anymore. I don't believe anything they say. They're all liars. And this is a massive crisis in confidence and trust in government
Right.
in the United States. The same thing is happening in the media. The same thing is happening in other institutions. And so this presents a massive problem for President Trump and his administration, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they're lying. I mean, they might be, they might not be lying, right? And the difficulty that the average person has is that you don't know whether or not you can trust someone. You don't know which part of the information to trust and which part of the information to
Do we know
discount.
who our enemies are?
Well, I believe in that sense in listening very closely to what people say. I believe in going to the source. And if you go to the Ayatollah Khamenei and you listen to what he has said, he's been consistent for a very long time. Death to
Correct.
America and death to Israel. And the actions that Iran has carried out on the ground are consistent with that stated policy. His lieutenants, the other clerics in the regime, what is said at Friday prayers in the mosque, that has all been consistent with that policy of death to Israel and death to the United States. So I believe them. I believe that that's what they mean. However, does that represent all of the Iranian people? Of course
No.
not. I was meeting with Iranian opposition members in Diyala province in Iraq, north of Baghdad. I met with them many times when I lived in Iraq for 5 years, and I have followed the Iranian opposition for what are we now? So for going on 3 decades, and there are so many people across Iran who have sacrificed everything to get out on the streets to voice their opposition to the regime. Girls, women who have taken off their hijabs or who have sung in public or spoken in public or danced in public, normal everyday things and freedoms and rights for which many of them have been disappeared or arrested, tortured, murdered, and so on, right? Many of them are still in captivity today. Many of them, nobody knows what happened to them, but after a while, everyone knows that they're dead. So if you try to understand from the perspective of the Iranian people, they have lived under an oppressive regime that doesn't, for many of them, it doesn't represent who they are or what they seek. And for
But the
them,
way to take off that regime now requires nuclear intervention, it seems. There is, or at least there is a nuclear risk to get rid of that
yeah,
regime.
I would be, I would caution against saying, well, I would absolutely say 100% it doesn't require nuclear intervention. I mean, when you say, depending on what you mean by nuclear intervention, that sounds like, a nuclear strike. In that sense, which is probably not what you meant, you mean intervening in the Iran's nuclear program. Well, this is what it
No,
comes
I
back.
actually meant that there are two studies that were presented to the president, one of which is stating that probably that type of bomb they're trying to say that it would work. They told the
Yeah,
president it may not actually work. They might need other tactics that involve some nuclear limited things, whatever. I do not really understand the language to
yes,
begin with. And we know that by now there are leaks, there are damages in the nuclear plants somewhere in Iran. And we know there is
sure.
about 9 million people living in Tehran by itself. What about looking at the other sides of the Iranian people? And as you said, not all the Iranian people, they like the regime to begin with. They try to stand against this. The
Yes.
losses and the potential losses will be going on, it seems, if we intervene, because there is no other way, right? We have to stop their nuclear program. We're
Well,
not going to compromise that.
it certainly appears that the policy of the present administration of the United States of America is that they are not prepared to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And many people, are asking online or have asked me, well, if you were Iranian, wouldn't you want to have a nuclear weapon? Well, I mean, probably, but that's only one part of the whole situation. Strategically, the justification the U.S. has for not allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon is that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism worldwide, and that you have, a genocidal regime. And by that, I mean they have referred to as a stated policy of the regime is the genocide of the Jewish people and Israel, and wiping Israel off the map. And not only that, Iran has proxies all over the world. So would Iran give nuclear weapons to the Houthis in Yemen? Quite possibly, because they know that if the Houthis in Yemen take the action, that comes back on the Houthis, and they can claim, they can claim plausible deniability. Whether people believe them or not is another issue. But I just want to say something important about the nuclear factor here. So two things. One is that when you talk about, what is it that Iran had or didn't have, it centers around the issue of enriched uranium, right? I mean, some people will say, oh, Iran isn't trying to make a bomb. They're just trying to build a civilian program. Well, you don't need enriched uranium for a civilian nuclear energy program. So that's a ridiculous argument. And it's for
Correct.
people who don't understand anything about nuclear energy. That's the one thing. The second thing is that when you are enriching uranium, which is what you need for a nuclear bomb, and the speed with which that is happening, that's the issue here that the United States is citing to justify action. But it's not in isolation, because the other part of that issue is the fact that Iran is working its missile capability, its intercontinental ballistic missile capability. And anyone who's looked, at any of the video online and seen Iran firing, 200, 300, 400, 500, ballistic missiles at Israel, and if you understand the technology and you understand the force, the potential that has, if that breaks through the Iron Dome in any kind of, large capacity, the state of Israel, which is tiny, could very well be obliterated.
Lebanon could be obliterated. Egypt, part of it could be obliterated. I mean, Israel and Lebanon and Jordan and Syria are
Correct.
practically almost the same country, right? In reality,
Yes.
they are the same geographical area and somehow. And I'm sure everybody's going to be affected. We've been watching those
Correct.
missiles crossing Lebanon
Fly overhead
in the sky, and I sent you some videos.
Yes.
It's actually scary. This war
Of
is
course.
definitely scary.
Yeah, because any of those missiles could, misfire and land in any of those countries along the way. Sometimes they misfire and fall in Iran, and sometimes they've landed in Gaza. So yes, it is terrifying, but also I'm glad you mentioned the region, because it's time for the world to be honest about a couple of things. Jordan, Egypt, all of these countries work behind the scenes with Israel. They don't want to say it publicly. They want to pretend, but especially when it comes to countries that are founded in majority Sunni Islamic countries, as opposed to the Shiites of Iran, these countries definitely do not want to see Iran establish itself and reestablish Persian hegemony in the region, which is a stated goal of the regime in Iran as well. So, while you have a lot of these countries will, of course, they express outrage about the people, Palestinians dying in Gaza and so on. But what they do is they help the Israelis behind the scene. They deliberately keep the Palestinians a stateless people. They don't give them citizenship in their countries. The refugees have had, in any other war situation, refugees living in your country for that long would have acquired citizenship. It doesn't
We
happen
have
in these countries because they use the Palestinian people like a tool. That's all they are.
Lara, we have 1 minute before our friends in KNUS will have to leave us, and then we stay on for KLZ for another 7 minutes. Is this a religious war?
Well, it's a war between good and evil. And I hesitate to say religious war in the sense that people want to say it's Islam versus Christianity and so on. It's not really. This is a
Okay.
war of good people of any faith versus evil people of
And
any
any
faith
faith.
or without a faith. I truly believe that. And I think a lot of people can see that. And it's really important to me that we don't get pushed into these fake paradigms. It's a fake paradigm that if you are against Sharia law in the United States, you're now against Islam. Or if you, as a Muslim, want the ability to raise your daughters the way you want to in your part of the world, well, okay, you get the right to do that. Just don't, it's just that in the United States, I don't really want to do that, right? But if
This
you
is
want to do it
beautiful.
here,
This is
it's your
beautiful way you
business.
explained it. This is a war between good versus evil inside every religion or no religion at all. I want to
Correct.
say a wonderful Sunday and happy feast day to all of our listeners on KNUS 710 AM. And I wish you a wonderful and happy Sunday. This was Father Andre with Lara Logan, and we are talking about the situation in Iran, in Israel, and in the United States. Please stay tuned for next Sunday as well as we continue to follow up with the situation, and let us all pray for peace. And thank you for being with us. Do not forget to go online and visit missionofhopeandmercy.org. Lara, I want to continue with you for our listeners on 33 Minutes on the Lord's Day. Speaking now, this is a war between good and evil. Who do you think has the moral superior authority to basically knowing that we're dealing here with nuclear risk? We are dealing with nuclear risk. Who has the moral authority to say, as a leader, now I want to interfere, knowing that the consequences could be losses of lives, losses of nations in the world, or possible nuclear attack of some sort, or escalation to a nuclear war? Do you really see from your information there could be that risk, or I'm talking of a risk that may not really necessarily be the reality?
Well, the first part is you said who has the moral authority to decide what risk is acceptable. The problem with the premise of that question is that built into it, it's implied that that if you just don't take any act at all, the risk goes away. All the risk goes away. And that is not true. So it's not like if you act, you create a problem, and if you don't act, you fix the problem. Those are not the only options here. In fact, there's just as much chance of there being, a massive war and nuclear risk if Trump fails to act and does nothing, and the United States is regarded as weak and toothless, and is then dismissed. This doesn't serve as a deterrent to action all over the world. So that's one part of it. And the second part of it is that nobody can sit here and tell you that there is zero risk. As long as a country has nuclear weapons, you can argue that there is some risk. However, my personal belief, based on my experience and my analysis of this situation, I do think that the risk of nuclear war here is being exaggerated, not by the
Okay.
Trump administration. I think, a nuclear weapon in the hands of a rogue state that has terrorist proxies all over the world, and that has demonstrated a complete lack of conscience in many respects, and it does not consider itself bound by international regulations. I think that not every country, we don't allow every country on earth to have nuclear weapons. It's not a nuclear free-for-all, and people will be jumping up and down saying, but Israel has nuclear weapons and they won't sign the non-proliferation treaty. Of course they won't, because they're a postage stamp. They're this size, and they're surrounded in a region by millions and millions of people, many of whom stated goal is to wipe Israel off the map. So, Israel has to have that there as a deterrent. But I will say this to you. Nobody seems to follow a nuclear strike to its logical conclusion, which is that, if Iran uses a nuclear weapon against Israel, the United States is going to be compelled to use a nuclear weapon against Iran. If Pakistan or any other country launches a nuclear weapon, they're going to be obliterated in return. So the reality is that the United States and the president has a moral responsibility to do everything within his power to ensure that it doesn't reach that point.
It's
And
beautiful.
so you can
You
argue
answered
about.
every question, actually. You really answered every question with great clarity. So I'm like you. I do believe that up to this point, President Trump is going to act according to his conscience, to the best benefit of the good versus evil in the world, and with the most limited consequences possible that could be probably creating a bigger war or escalation to a nuclear thing. I think he's gonna act right? It's a just war, what you're saying. If he's gonna act, it's gonna be from within the spectrum of the principle of proportionality and the just war doctrine, which is pleasing basically to all religions, most likely.
Well, I think it appears to me, based on his statements, that what President Trump is really trying to do is to nip this in the bud by allowing and supporting Israel in their attempt to obliterate Iran's nuclear weapons program. They're both acting as a deterrent, right? Because you could argue that, one Iranian scientist is killed, but the next one comes along and continues the program. The question is, how many people are lining up to continue the program if everybody involved in it is dead?
I see.
That doesn't mean that no one will ever stand up. You might say that will, that can give rise, some young Iranian kid watching Israel do this is going to grow up with hatred in his heart and be determined to go after Israel for as long as he has breath in his body. Well, you can argue that, but the alternative has been a demonstrable failure, because Iran has continued with its policies. It has continued to enrich uranium. It has continued to grow its terrorist proxies all over the world, and it has continued to interfere in other nations. What is ironic here is that the U.S. and Israel, are attacked for interfering in other nations, but Iran interferes in nations all over the world. I mean, just
I
ask your
see.
fellow Christians in Lebanon how they feel about
I
Hezbollah.
love to talk about this honestly, if you give me time for next time as well, because my situation, Lebanon's situation, and they are in South America, even in the US, they have almost intercontinental workforce for them, right? They're not only restricted to Iran. I think they have enough support all over the world. It seems we are facing a challenging situation, as you said, for good versus evil. Humanity is in a tremendous suffering, and there is confusion, and there are enemies within the gate in every nation, and there are good people within the gate in every nation.
For
It
sure.
seems that President Trump is going back to define that our United States of America is one nation under God. It is a good nation, despite the polarization in its foreign policy sometimes, and the differences in the way we deal with many nations and how we make treatments. And these, at least in his administration, he's going to make sure United States is standing for what is good and for peace in the world. This is what you basically are saying. I love to develop this with you more, Lara. Our time is up at this point. You've been amazing. My friends, pray for peace, pray for President Trump, pray for our government, pray for the United States of America, because honestly, as Lara is saying, the action that we are about to take, or we have taken by the time of the show being broadcasted, has to be good for humanity, for peace in the world, for the future of the humanity, and for all the nations of the world. We are trying to seek a peace through strength. And now we need the prayer so that peace through strength does not come with a lot of damage. and may God bless you. Amen.
May God bless you, Father.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you.